Welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we're going through the book titled Thought Power, Its Control and Culture by Besant. In the previous video, we covered the chapters titled Thought Transference and the Beginnings of Thought. So if you found me at this video and would like to access the previous chapters, please visit my book playlist. Now, before I turn the page to the next chapter, let me share a brief point of interest from the previous chapter. Mind you, since thought is said to be of the mind, I believe that this book has its place in anyone's library if they are seeking to learn how to master thought and harness its power. Now, these past chapters offered an insight on the power of the mind to use its immense storehouse of images and help in the visualization process, which I believe is very helpful for anyone who's truly working on finding ways to become manifestors or to manifest more of what they want in their lives. Now, the author again offers exercises that can help with greater memory retention, and in the end, it makes sense that like any and many muscles, if we don't use them, we lose them. So I do agree with the author in the benefits of developing our mind, as it is a stimulus to our evolution and should not be neglected by those who seek to grow and by those seeking to serve the greater humanity. So with that, please do sit back, enjoy as I turn the page. Thought Power, Its Control and Culture by Besant. This book is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Memory. The nature of memory. When a connection between a pleasure and a certain object is established, there arises the definite desire to again obtain that object and so repeat the pleasure. Or, when a connection between a pain and a certain object is established, there arises a definite desire to avoid that object and so escape the pain. On stimulation, the mental body readily repeats the image of the object, for owing to the general law that energy flows in the direction of least resistance, the matter of the mental body is shaped most easily into the form already frequently taken. This tendency to repeat vibrations once started when acted on by energy is due to tamas, to the inertia of matter, and is the germ of memory. The molecules of matter, having been grouped together, fall slowly apart as other energies play on them, but retain for a considerable time the tendency to resume their mutual relation. If an impulse such as grouped them be given to them, they promptly fall again into position. Further, when the knower has vibrated in any particular way, that power of vibration remains in him, and in the case of the pleasure-giving or pain-giving object, the desire for the object or for avoiding the object sets that power free, pushes it outwards, one might say, and thus gives the necessary stimulation to the mental body. The image thus produced is recognized by the knower, and in the one case, the attachment caused by pleasure makes him reproduce also the image of the pleasure. In the other, the repulsion caused by pain equally causes the image of the pain. The object and the pleasure, or the object and the pain, are connected together in experience, and when the set of vibrations that compose the image of the object is made, the set of vibrations that make up the pleasure or the pain is also started, and the pleasure or the pain is retasted in the absence of the object. That is memory in its simplest form, a self-initiated vibration of the same nature as that which caused the feeling of pleasure or pain, again causing that feeling. These images are less massive, and hence to the partially developed knower less vivid and living than those caused by contact with an external object, the heavy physical vibrations lending much energy to the mental and desire images. But fundamentally, the vibrations are identical, and memory is the reproduction in mental matter by the knower of objects previously contacted. This reflection may be and is repeated over and over again in subtler and subtler matter without regard to any separated knower, and these in their totality are the partial contents of the memory of the Logos, the Lord of a universe. These images of images may be reached by any separated knower in proportion as he has developed within himself the power of vibration above mentioned. As in wireless telegraphy, a series of vibrations composing a message may be caught by any suitable receiver, i.e., any receiver capable of reproducing them. So can a latent vibratory potency within a knower be made active by a vibration similar to it in these cosmic images. These, on the Akashic plane, form the Akashic records, often spoken of in theosophical literature, and they last through the life of the system. Bad memory. In order that we may clearly understand what lies at the root of bad memory, we must examine the mental processes which go to make up what is called memory. Although in many psychological books memory is spoken of as a mental faculty, there is really no one faculty to which that name should be given. The persistence of a mental image is not due to any special faculty, but belongs to the general quality of the mind. A feeble mind is feeble in persistence as in all else, and, like a substance too fluid to retain the shape of the mold into which it has been poured, falls quickly out of the form it has taken. Where the mental body is little organized is a mere loose aggregate of the molecules of mind stuff. A cloud-like mass without much coherence, memory will certainly be very weak. But this weakness is general, not special. It is common to the whole mind and is due to its low stage of evolution. As the mental body becomes organized and the powers of the jiva work in it, we yet often find what is called a bad memory. But if we observe this bad memory, we shall find that it is not faulty in all respects, that there are some things which are well remembered, and which the mind retains without effort. If we then examine these remembered things, we shall find that they are things which greatly attract the mind, that the things that are much like are not forgotten. I have known a woman complain of a bad memory with respect to matters that were being studied, while I have observed her in a very retentive memory with regard to the details of a dress that she admired. Her mental body was not lacking in a fair amount of retentiveness, and when she observed carefully and attentively, producing a clear mental image, the image was fairly long-lived. Here we have the key to bad memory. It is due to lack of attention, to lack of accurate observation, and therefore to confused thought. Confused thought is the blurred impression caused by careless observation and lack of attention, while clear thought is the sharply cut impression due to concentrated attention and careful, accurate observation. We do not remember the things to which we pay little heed, but we remember well the things that keenly interest us. How, then, should a bad memory be treated? First, the things should be noticed with regard to which it is bad and with regard to which it is good, so as to estimate the general quality of adhesiveness. Then the things with regard to which it is bad should be scrutinized in order to see if they are worth remembering and if they are things for which we do not care. If we find that we care little for them, but then in our best moments we feel we ought to care for them, then we should say to ourselves, I will pay attention to them, will observe them accurately, and will think carefully and steadily on them. Doing this, we shall find our memory improve. For, as said above, memory is really dependent on attention, accurate observation, and clear thought. The element of attraction is valuable as fixing the attention, but if that be not present, its place must be taken by the will. Now, it is just here that a very definite and widely felt difficulty arises. How can the will take the place of the attraction? What is to move the will itself? Attraction arouses desire, and desire impels the moving towards the attractive object. This is, in the case supposed, absent. How is this absence of desire to be made good by the will? The will is the force prompting action when that force is determined in its direction by the deliberate reason and not by the influence of the external objects felt as attractive. When the impulse to action, that which I have often called the outgoing energy of the self, is motivated by external objects, is drawn forth, we call the impulse desire. When it is motivated by the pure reason, is sent forth, we call it will. What is needed then, in the absence of felt attraction from without, is illumination from within, and the motive for the will must be obtained by an intellectual survey of the field and an exercise of the judgment as to the highest good, the goal of effort. That which the reason selects as the thing most conducive to the good of the self serves as motive to the will. And when this has once been definitely done, then in moments of lassitude, of weakness, the recalling of the train of thought which led to the choice again stimulates the will. Such a thing, deliberately chosen, may then be rendered attractive, i.e., an object of desire, by setting the imagination to picture its pleasing qualities, the beneficial, happiness-giving effects of its possession. But as he who wills an object wills the means, we become able to overcome the natural shrinking from effort and unpleasant discipline by an exercise thus motivated of the will. In the case under consideration, having determined that certain objects are eminently desirable as conducive to prolonged happiness, we set the will to work to carry out the activities which will lead to their obtaining. In cultivating the power of observation, as in everything else, a little practice repeated daily is much more effective than a great effort followed by a period of inaction. We should set ourselves a little daily task of observing a thing carefully, imaging it in the mind in all its details, keeping the mind fixed on it for a short time, as the physical eye might be fixed on an object. On the following day, we should call up the image, reproducing it as accurately as we can, and should then compare it with the object and observe any inaccuracies. If we gave 5 minutes a day to this practice, alternately observing an object and picturing it in the mind and recalling the previous day's image and comparing our picture with the object, we should improve our memory very rapidly, and we should really be improving our powers of observation, of attention, of imagination, of concentration. In fact, we should be organizing the mental body and fitting it far more rapidly than nature will fit it without assistance to discharge its functions effectively and usefully. No man can take up such a practice as this and remain unaffected by it, and he will soon have the satisfaction of knowing that his powers have increased and that they have come much more under the control of the will. The artificial ways of improving the memory present things to the mind in an attractive form, or associate with such a form the things to be remembered. If a person visualizes easily, he will aid a bad memory by constructing a picture and attaching to points in that picture the things he wants to remember. Then the calling up of the picture brings up also the things that were to be remembered. Other people, in whom the auditory power is dominant, remember by the jingle of rhymes, and for instance, weave a series of dates or other unattractive facts into verses that stick in the mind. But far better than any of these ways is the rational method detailed above, by the use of which the mind-body becomes better organized, more coherent as to its materials. Memory and anticipation. Let us return to our undeveloped knower. When memory begins to function, anticipation quickly follows, for anticipation is only memory thrown forwards. When memory gives the retasting of a pleasure experienced in the past, desire seeks to again grasp the object which gave the pleasure, and when this retasting is thought of as the result of finding that object in the outer world and enjoying it, we have anticipation. The image of the object and the image of the pleasure are dwelt on by the knower in relation to each other. If he adds to this contemplation the element of time, of past and future, two names are given to such contemplation. The contemplation plus the idea of the past is memory, plus the idea of the future, it is anticipation. As we study these images, we begin to understand the full force of the aphorism of Patanjali, that for the practice of yoga, a man must stop the modifications of the thinking principle. Looked at from the standpoint of occult science, every contact with the not self modifies the mental body. Part of the stuff of which that body is composed is rearranged as a picture or image of the external object. When relations are established between these images, that is thinking, as seen on the form side. Correspondent with this are vibrations in the knower himself. And these modifications within himself are thinking as seen on the life side. It must not be forgotten that the establishing of these relations is the peculiar work of the knower, his addition to the images, and that this addition changes the images into thoughts. The pictures in the mental body very much resemble in their character the impressions made on a sensitive plate by the etheric waves which lie beyond the light spectrum and which act chemically on the silver salts, rearranging the matter on the sensitive plate so that pictures are formed on it of the objects to which it has been exposed. So in the sensitive plate that we call the mental body, the materials are rearranged as a picture of the objects that have been contacted. The knower perceives these pictures by his own responsive vibrations, studies them, and after a while begins to arrange them and to modify them by the vibrations he sends out on them from himself. By the law already spoken of, that energy follows the line of least resistance, he reforms over and over again the same images, makes images of images, so long as he confines himself to this simple reproduction. With the sole addition of the time element, we have, as said, memory and anticipation. Concrete thinking is, after all, only a repetition in subtler matter of everyday experiences, with this difference that the knower can stop and change their sequence, repeat them, hurry or slacken them as he will. He can then delay on any image, brood over it, dwell on it, and can thus gain from his leisurely re-examination of experiences much that had escaped him as he passed through them, bound to the unresting, unhasting wheel of time. Within his own domain, he can make his own time, so far as its measures are concerned, as does the logos for his worlds. Only he cannot escape from the essence of time, succession, until he can touch the logic consciousness, freeing himself from the bonds of the world matter, and then, even, only so far as the system is concerned. End of chapter. Stay right here. I'm going to flip over to the next chapter. Before I do that, be so kind and hit that like button, and also let me know you are here. Leave me a comment. What do you find interesting about this chapter so far? Okay, let's move on to chapter 6, the growth of thought. Observation and its value. The first requisite for competent thinking is attentive and accurate observation. The self as knower must observe the not self with attention and with accuracy, if it is to become the known and thus merge in the self. The second requisite is receptivity and tenacity in the mental body, the power of yielding quickly to impressions and of retaining them when made. In proportion to the attention and accuracy of the knower's observation and the receptivity and tenacity of his mental body will be the rapidity of his evolution, the speed at which his latent potencies become active powers. If the knower have not accurately observed the thought image, or if the mental body being undeveloped has been insensitive to all but the stronger vibrations of an external object, and so has been modified into an imperfect reproduction, the material for thought is inadequate and misleading. The broad outline is at first all that is obtained, the details being blurred or even omitted. As we evolve our faculties And as we build finer stuff into the mental body, we find that we receive from the same external object much more than we received in our undeveloped days. Thus, we find much more in an object than we before found in it. Let two men stand in a field in presence of a splendid sunset. Let one of these be an undeveloped agriculture laborer who has not been in the habit of observing nature save with reference to his crops, who has only looked at the sky to see if it promises rain or sunshine, caring nothing for its aspects save as they bear on his own livelihood and employment. Let the second be an artist, a painter of genius, full of the love of beauty and trained to see and enjoy every shade and tone of color. The laborer's physical, astral, and mental bodies are all in presence of that gorgeous sunset, and all the vibrations caused by it are playing upon the vehicles of his consciousness. He sees different colors in the sky, and observes that there is much red, promising a fine day for the morrow, good or bad for his crops, as the case may be. This is all he gets out of it. The painter's physical, astral, and mental bodies are all exposed to exactly the same pulsations as those of the laborer. But how different is the result? The fine material of his bodies reproduces 1,000,000 vibrations too rapid and subtle to move the coarse material of the other. His image of the sunset is consequently quite different from the image produced in the laborer. The delicate shades of color, hue melting into hue, translucent blue and rose and palest green, lighted with golden gleams and flecked with royal purple, all these are tasted with a lingering joy and ecstasy of sensuous delight. They are waked all fine emotions, love and admiration, merging into reverence and joy that such beauty can be. Ideas of the most inspiring character arise as the mental body modifies itself under the vibrations playing on it on the mental plane from the mental aspect of the sunset. The difference of the images is not due to an external cause, but to an internal receptivity. It does not lie in the outside, but in the capacity to respond. It is not in the not-self, but in the self and its sheaths. According to these differences is the result produced. How little flows into the one, how much into the other. Here we see, with startling force, the meaning of the evolution of the knower. A universe of beauty may be around us, its waves playing on us from every side, and yet for us it may be non-existent. Everything that is in the mind of the logos of our system is playing on us and our bodies now. How much of it we can receive marks the stage of our evolution. What is wanted for growth is not a change without us, but a change within us. Everything is already given us, but we have to develop the capacity to receive. It will be gathered from what has just been said that one element in clear thinking is accurate observation. We have to begin this work on the physical plane, where our bodies come into contact with the not-self. We climb upwards, and all evolution begins on the lower plane and passes on into the higher. On the lower, we first touch the external world, and thence the vibrations pass upwards or inwards, calling out the inner powers. Accurate observation, then, is a faculty to be definitely cultivated. Most people go through the world with their eyes half closed, and we can each test this for ourselves by questioning ourselves on what we have observed while passing along a street. We can ask, what have I observed while walking down the street? Many persons will have observed next to nothing. No clear images have been formed. Others will have observed a few things. Some will have observed many. It is related by Houdin that he trained his child in observing the contents of the shops he passed, walking along the streets of London, until he could give the whole contents of a shopfront which he had passed by without stopping, having thrown over it a mere glance. The normal child and the savage are observant, and according to the extent of their capacity for observation is the measure of their intelligence. The habit of clear, quick observation lies in the average man at the root of clear thinking. Those who think most confusedly are generally those who observe least accurately, except where intelligence is highly developed and is turned inwards habitually, and the bodies have not been trained in the way spoken of below. But the answer to the above question may be, I was thinking of something else and therefore did not observe. And the answer is a good one. If the answerer was thinking of something more important than the training of the mental body and of the power of attention by careful observation, such a one may have done well in his lack of observation. But if the answerer has only been dreaming and drifting about aimlessly, then he has wasted his time much more than if he had turned his energy outwards. A man deeply engaged in thought will be unobservant of passing objects, turned inwards and not outwards, and will not attend to what is going on before him. It may not be worth his while, in this life, to train his bodies to make quasi-independent observation, for the highly developed and the partially developed need different training. But how many of the unobservant people are really deeply engaged in thought? In most people's minds, all that is going on is an idle looking at any thought image that happens to present itself. A turning over of the contents of the mind in an aimless fashion, as an idle woman turns over the contents of her wardrobes or her jewel box. This is not thinking. For thinking means, as we have seen, the establishing of relations, the adding of something not previously present. In thinking, the attention of the knower is deliberately directed to the thought images, and he exerts himself actively upon them. The development then of the habit of observation is part of the training of the mind, and those who practice it will find that the mind becomes clearer, increases in power, and becomes more easily manageable, so that they can direct it on any given object much better than they had been able previously to do. Now this power of observation, once definitely established, works automatically, the mental and other bodies registering images which are available if wanted later, without calling at the same time on the attention of their owner. It is, then, no longer necessary that the attention of the person should be directed to objects presented to the sense organs in order that an impression of those objects may be made and preserved. A very trivial but significant case of this kind happened in my own experience. While I was traveling in America, a question arose one day about the number on the engine of a train by which we had been traveling. The number was instantly presented to me by my mind, but this was not in any sense a case of clairvoyance. For clairvoyant perception, it would have been necessary to have hunted up the train and looked for the number. Without any conscious action on my part, the sense organs, senses, and mind had observed and registered the number as the train came into the station, and when the number was wanted, the mental image of the incoming train, with the number on the front of the engine, at once came up. This faculty, once established, is a useful one, for it means that when things that have been passing around you have not attracted your attention at the time, you can nonetheless recall them by looking at the record which the mental, astral, and physical bodies have made of them on their own account. This automatic activity of the mental body, outside the conscious activity of the jiva, goes on, however, more extensively in all of us than might be supposed. For it has been found that when a person is hypnotized, he will report a number of small events which had passed him by without arousing his attention. These impressions reach the mental body through the brain, and are impressed on the latter as well as on the former. Many impressions thus reach the mental body that are not sufficiently deep to enter into consciousness, not because consciousness cannot cognize them, but because it is not normally awake enough to notice any but the deeper impressions. In the hypnotic trance, in delirium, in physical dreams, when the jiva is away, the brain yields up these impressions, which are usually overpowered by the far stronger impressions received by and made by the jiva himself. But if the mind is trained to observe and record, then the jiva can recover from it, at will, the impressions thus made. Thus, if two people walk down a street, one trained in observation and the other not, both would receive a number of impressions, and neither might be conscious of the receipt of these at the time. But afterwards, the trained observer would be able to recover these impressions, while the other would not. As this power lies at the root of clear thinking, those who desire to culture and control thought power will do well to cultivate the habit of observation, and to sacrifice the mere pleasure of drifting idly along whithersoever the stream of fancy may carry them. The evolution of mental faculties. As images accumulate, the work of the knower becomes more complicated, and his activity upon them draws out one power after another inherent in his divine nature. He no longer accepts the external world only in its simple relation to himself, as containing objects that are causes of pleasure or pain to himself, but he arranges side by side the images representing them, studies them in their various aspects, shifts them about, and reconsiders them. He begins also to arrange his own observations. He observes, when one image brings up another, the order of their succession. When a second has followed a first many times, he begins to look for the second when the first appears, and thus links the two together. This is his first attempt at reasoning, and here again we have the calling out of an inherent faculty. He argues that because A and B have always appeared successively, therefore, when A appears, B will appear. This forecast being continually verified, he comes to link them together as cause and effect, and many of his early errors are due to a too hasty establishment of this relation. Further, setting images side by side, he observes their unlikenesses and likenesses, and develops a power of comparison. He chooses one or another as pleasure-giving, and moves the body in search of them in the external world, developing judgment by these selections and their consequences. He evolves a sense of proportion in relation to the likenesses and unlikenesses, and groups objects together by their prominent likenesses, separating them from others by their prominent unlikenesses. Here also he makes many errors, corrected by later observations, being easily misled at first by surface similarities. Thus observation, discrimination, reason, comparison, judgment, are evolved one after another, and these faculties grow with exercise, and thus the aspect of the self as knower is developed by the activity of thoughts, by the action and reaction continually repeated between the self and the not-self. To quicken the evolution of these faculties, we must deliberately and consciously exercise them, using the circumstances of daily life as opportunities for developing them. Just as we saw that the power of observation might be trained in everyday life, so can we accustom ourselves to see the points of likeness and unlikeness in the objects round us. We can draw conclusion and test them by events. We can compare and judge, and all this consciously and of set purpose. Thought power grows rapidly under this deliberate exercise, and becomes a thing that is consciously wielded, felt as a definite possession. The training of the mind. To train the mind in any one direction is to train it altogether to some extent, for any definite kind of training organizes the mind stuff of which the mental body is composed, and also calls out some of the powers of the knower. The increased capacity can be directed to any end and is available for all purposes. A trained mind can be applied to a new subject, and will grapple with it and master it in a way impossible to the untrained, and this is the use of education. But it should always be remembered that the training of the mind does not consist of cramming it with facts, but in drawing out its powers. The mind does not grow by being gorged with other people's thoughts, but by exercising its own faculties. It is said of the great teachers who stand at the head of human evolution that they know everything which exists within the solar system. This does not mean that every fact therein is always within their consciousness, but that they have so developed the aspect of knowledge in themselves that whenever they turn their attention in any direction, they know the object to which it is turned. This is a much greater thing than the storage in mind of any number of facts, as it is a greater thing to see any object on which the eye is turned than to be blind and to know it only by the description given of it by others. The evolution of the mind is measured not by the images it contains, but by the development of the nature which is knowledge, the power to reproduce within itself anything that is presented to it. This will be as useful in any other universe as in this, and once gained, is ours to use wherever we may be. Association with superiors. Now, this work of training the mind may be very much helped forward by coming into touch with those who are more highly evolved than ourselves. A thinker who is stronger than we are can materially aid us, for he sends out vibrations of a higher order than we are able to create. A piece of iron lying on the ground cannot start heat vibrations on its own account. But if it happens to be placed near a fire, it can answer to the heat vibrations of the fire and thus become hot. When we come near a strong thinker, his vibrations play on our mental bodies and set up in them corresponding vibrations, so that we vibrate sympathetically with him. For the time being, we feel that our mental power is increased and that we are able to grasp conceptions that normally elude us. But when we are again alone, we find that these very conceptions have become blurred and confused. People will listen to a lecture and follow it intelligently, for the time being understanding the teaching it conveys. They go away satisfied, feeling that they have made a substantial gain in knowledge. On the following day, wishing to share with a friend what had been gained, they find to their mortification that they cannot reproduce the conceptions which seem to be so clear and luminous. Often they will exclaim impatiently, "I am sure I know it. It is there, if I could only get hold of it." This feeling arises from the memory of the vibrations which both mental body and jiva have experienced. There is the consciousness of having realized the conceptions, the memory of the forms taken, and the feeling that, having produced them, reproduction should be easy. But on the previous day it was the masterful vibrations of the stronger thinker that shaped the forms taken by the mental body. They were molded from without, not from within. The sense of inability experienced on the attempt to reproduce them means that this shaping must be done for them a few times before they will have sufficient strength to reproduce those forms by self-initiated vibrations. The knower must have vibrated in these higher ways several times ere he can produce the vibrations at will. By virtue of his own inherent nature, he can evolve the power within himself to reproduce them when he has been made to answer several times by impact from without. The power in both knowers is the same, but one has evolved it, while in the other it is latent. It is brought out of latency by the contact with a similar power already in activity, and thus the stronger quickens the evolution of the weaker. Herein lies one of the values of associating with persons more advanced than ourselves. We profit by their contact and grow under their stimulating influence. A true teacher will thus aid his disciples far more by keeping them near him than by any spoken words. For this influence, direct personal contact affords the most effective channel. But failing this, or in association with it, much may also be gained from books, if the books be wisely chosen. In reading the work of a really great writer, we should try for the time to put ourselves in a negative or receptive condition so as to receive as many of his thought vibrations as possible. When we have read the words, we should dwell on them, ponder over them, try to sense the thought they partially express, draw out of them all their hidden relationships. Our attention must be concentrated so as to piece the mind of the writer through the veil of his works. Such reading serves as an education and helps forward our mental evolution. Less strenuous reading may serve as a pleasant pastime, may store our minds with valuable facts, and so subserve our usefulness. But such reading, as is described, means a stimulus to our evolution and should not be neglected by those who seek to grow in order to serve. End of chapter. Let me know you were here. Hit that like button and leave me a comment. Also, if you would like to get notified of future videos, please do subscribe and hit the bell. Now, if you are interested in learning on how to focus more and concentrate, well, meet me at the next video as I turn the page to the chapter on concentration.